I feel like, as a lawyer, I have prepared for a 2-week trial, and I've been told that I'm going to be limited to the opening statement. So I've got an hour to tell you what I've taken months to prepare for. So anyway, you're just going to have to believe me that I have the evidence to back up what I'm going to tell you in this opening statement. Okay? Is that fair enough? Okay. The title of this is What You Don't Know Can Harm You or Hurt You. There are many things out there that we as Christians either accept or put up with, or we notice obliquely. We just don't, we don't really pay that much attention to them. And in the meantime, this country and the world is under an invasion right now. Frankly, there's an occult invasion. If you look around, what are the names of some of the popular movies and popular books right now that the kids are getting into? Now, some people have endorsed those. Well, I don't think they've done all the research and homework they need to, okay? The occult is the occult, and that is our enemy. They're against the soldiers of Jesus Christ, and that's what we are, okay? Now, I'll get into more of that later. This is going to bounce around a little bit because you understand I'm covering 2 weeks of preparation. We're going to put it in less than an hour, okay? Here's something regarding Islam. Allah or Jesus. And this, believe it or not, was sent to me by one of my classmates from University of Richmond. Last month, I attended, this is from a man who went to a prison to meet with some of the prisoners and the clergy that go there. Last month, I attended my annual training sessions that's required for maintaining my state prison security clearance. During the training session, there was a presentation by 3 speakers representing the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant faith, and the Muslim faiths, who explained their belief systems. I was particularly interested in what the Islamic imam or imam had to say. The imam gave a great presentation of the basics of Islam, complete with a video. After the presentation time, there was the time provided for questions and answers. When it was my turn, I directed my questions to the imam and asked, "Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that most imam and clerics of Islam have declared a holy jihad or a holy war against the infidels of the whole world. And that by killing an infidel, which is a command to all Muslims from the Quran, they are assured of a place in heaven. If that's the case, can you give me, Mr. Imam, the definition of an infidel?" There was no disagreement with my statements, and without hesitation, the Imam replied, "Non-believers in Islam." That's you, and that's me, and most of the world, other than the 1.3 billion Muslims. I responded, "So let me be sure that I have this straight. All followers of Allah have been commanded to kill everyone who is not of your faith so that they can go to heaven. Is that correct?" The expression on his face changed from one of authority and command to that of a little boy who had just gotten caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He sheepishly replied, "Yes." I then stated, "Well, sir, I have a real problem trying to imagine Pope John Paul commending all Catholics to kill those of your faith, or Pat Robertson or Dr. Stanley ordering Protestants to do the same in order to go to heaven." The imam was speechless. I continued, "I also have a problem with being your friend when you and your brother clerics are telling your followers to kill me. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather have your Allah, who tells you to kill me in order to go to heaven, or my Jesus, who tells me to love you because I am going to heaven and he wants you to be there with me?" That sums up the battle in Islam. One other misconception, and it was caused by the translation of the Bible. When the Bible was translated into Arabic, they translated the word God as Allah. Allah is not God, Jehovah, the God that we worship and the Jews worship, okay? Allah was one of 360 spirits in Mecca back in the 6th century that they worshiped there in the capital city. Muhammad picked this one spirit, Allah, to be the God, and he allegedly was given the Quran by a jinn, or he said the angel Gabriel, even though Muhammad was an illiterate man, and supposedly it's infallible. Well, there's one easy test to know whether or not Allah is the same God. You all know what the Dome of the Rock is in Jerusalem, right? Well, there's another Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Dome of the Rock, okay? That's where they go to worship. On the outside of that, it says, Allah has no son. As we say in law, a fortiori, meaning it follows. Just want to show you I knew some Latin, but that was it, very little. Anyway, it follows, therefore, if Allah had no son, and we know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and God made flesh who dwelt among us, then Allah can't be God because he had no son. Very simple. So how can we say that it's a religion of peace? That's the politically correct version. Now, I don't have to deal with them, negotiate with them, and things like that, so I can tell you the truth. If I was in a political capacity, maybe I'd have to parse my words. I think I haven't heard that since the last administration, but anyway, y'all have heard that before. Okay. We'll get into the definition of is later, but that's okay. Anyway, that should be enough for you to go buy the book and find out the rest, okay? Or actually, there are a lot of other good books on Islam. Most of the speakers here have written them too, and there's a lot of great information out there, but you now know enough to know that Allah is not God, and they are wrong, okay? But pray for them. You can't really witness to a Muslim, okay? They're told not to receive it. They're also told not to have Jews and Christians as friends. So you're going to have to try to get around that by befriending them if you can, and be a witness to them and show them love. Why? Because Allah is not love. It's based on works and fear and intimidation, okay? Whereas, what does it say in the Bible? God is love. Okay? There's the difference. Now you know you've just passed the short course on Islam, okay? 2 Timothy 3. Starting at verse 1. Most of you obviously know this and can probably recite parts of it. 1 through 5 and then verse 7. This know also, that in the last days, are we in the last days? Absolutely. Perilous times shall come. That can also be translated fierce. It's only used twice in the Bible, and the other time it's translated fierce. Perilous times shall come. Fierce times shall come. And then listen and see if any of this applies to today. For men shall be lovers of their own selves. And they even go to San Francisco and get married now. But covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy. Is there any unholiness out there today in the world? Without natural affection. They're in San Francisco, getting married. Truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good. Mel Gibson's gotten a lot of flack from the world because of the Passion of Christ, hadn't he? Well, that was a good message, a good movie that was put out. Traitors. Now that's a word, traitors. Everybody knows what a traitor is, but nobody really thinks about it and thinks about where traitors may be and at what level they may be. Just think of that as we cover some more information. Heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. Aren't we in the time of the deceitfulness of riches, the lust of other things have taken away the love of God from many people? We spend more money on dog food in this country, as I've heard, than we do on missions. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. There are instructions in there. Then verse 7, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, doesn't that sum up some of what's going on out there today across the world and especially across this country at this time? Now, there's another verse I want to cover in 2 Thessalonians 2. And this talks about the Antichrist. But down at verse 11, well, actually verse 10. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. You need to warn your friends and relatives that aren't saved, in a nice way, you can give them my book maybe, that they are going someplace when they die. And probably 90% plus of the world today is going to go to hell when they die, unless they get saved. I mean, those are horrible figures. But think about it. You can have Christians and you can have sold out believers. Hopefully, these are all sold out believers, or you wouldn't be here spending your time and your money to listen to what we have to say, okay? Now, one more scripture. Well, actually, two more. Chapter 3 in Galatians. O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ hath been evidently set forth, crucified among you. There's a lot of deception out there. We've been bewitched. We've been deceived. Hollywood is helping with that. With these authors putting these books out for our kids to be deceived and be led astray. Whatever you put in your mind is still back in there. You know, our mind is a remarkable thing. It's just like the hard drive of your computer. Everything is in there that you've ever had on it is still in the hard drive somewhere, and unless you use special technology, it's going to be there if somebody wants to pick it up and look for things, even if you've deleted things. And these days, thanks to Echelon and Carnivore and things like that, which are government programs, your emails and everything else are, as Grant Jeffrey was saying, they're being stored somewhere. And they have incredibly fast, the National Security Agency has incredibly fast computers that can go through these things and look for certain words and phrases. And fortunately, it's not Christian at this point. But just be aware, okay? One more scripture. And this is from Ezekiel, the Old Testament, and most of you are familiar with it. In my Bible, which, by the way, is God's News Behind the News Prophecy Bible that I got in 1981. So, didn't know I'd ever be up here at that point, but anyway, it is falling apart a little bit, like I need to put a little glue on there, but after seeing how Lindsay carries his in a Ziploc, I feel a lot better about this one. This one's got a long ways to go, okay? Much better. Matter of fact, Ephesians fell out last year and I had to super glue it back in. So it's a little bit shorter than the rest of the pages. But okay, I'm as good at repairing Bibles as I am my car. But anyway, this is the watchman's duty. Again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him up for their watchman, if when he, the watchman, seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. The person who heard the warning and didn't take it. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But and this is to me, if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take away any person from among them, he has taken away his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. Therefore, I'm going to cover some things today that you may or may not agree with. You'll still love me afterwards, I know that, because we're Christians. But, can we agree to not agree on everything? Believe me, I've done a lot of research. I've spent years and years getting into this. And like I said, I have most of a book written on it. Okay, these are just some points. Here's Jay Leno is not one of my people I normally watch, but he did have Mel Gibson on the other night, and it was a good interview. He did not blaspheme God, and his jokes were really low-key for what it could have been. But here's what he said one time. As many of you know, the U.S. is putting together a constitution for Iraq. Everybody knows that, right? Why don't we just give them ours? Think about it. It was written by very smart people. It's served us well here in the United States for over 200 years. And besides, we're not using it anymore. This is a silver certificate. I'll get to that later. But anyway, we basically have abrogated through the Patriot Act 1 and 2. And by the way, Patriot Act 2, even though it came out, I believe it was February of last year, in a draft form, and there was such an uproar among conservatives that they basically pulled it back in, broke it into other pieces, and now are passing it piecemeal. And the major part of Patriot Act 2 actually was signed into law by the President on December 13th, 2003. Well, y'all watch the news and keep track of things. Why didn't you know that? Right? Don't you watch the news? Why didn't you know that? Well, that person that Grant Jeffrey talked about last night that was living in a hole just happened to be captured on December 13th. So guess what was all over the news that day? So they call that the stealth passage or the stealth amendment, okay? Some of you are nodding your heads. I know you know that. But here's something. I'm going to give you some information that I carry around in my briefcase that I've used for witnessing or talking to people for years that you may or may not be aware of. This is something that I had. I was saved in 1978, so you can figure out how long I've been a Christian. But anyway, although I was a Christian for years before that. In May 1919, at Dusseldorf, Germany, the Allied forces following World War I captured a very significant document entitled Communist Rules for Revolution. As you read these rules now, 85 years later, keep in mind what you're reading and hearing every day via the news media. And this applied 25 years ago when I first found this. A, corrupt the young. Is that going on? Get them away from religion, get them interested in sex, make them superficial, and destroy their ruggedness. Is that going on? Absolutely. B, get control of all means of publicity, thereby accomplishing the following. 1, get the people's mind off their government by focusing their attention on athletic, sexy books and plays and other trivialities. Divide the people into hostile groups by constantly harping on controversial matters of no importance. 3, destroy the people's faith in their natural leaders by holding the latter up to contempt and ridicule. Has that happened? 4, always preach true democracy, but seize power as fast and as ruthlessly as possible. Believe me, you don't want true democracy. I thought, well, this was no, this is a republic, a constitutional republic, okay? They're trying to put a democracy in Iraq. It's not going to happen. There isn't a democracy in a single Islamic country, so they're wasting their time doing it. I'm just telling them ahead of time to save them a lot of time and trouble. But anyway, they're not going to have a democracy in Iraq, I don't believe, unless they change religions, okay? Any more than they are any other Islamic country. They want to put Sharia law into Iraq right now, which is what they have in Iran, so the women can go back to wearing their burqas and things like that. So Anyway, 5, by encouraging government extravagance. Do we have any of that? I mean, our congressmen individually are all great. We all like our congressmen. They all do a good job, right? But collectively, we think they do a lousy job. What's wrong with that story? You know, there's something wrong there, okay? There's an awful lot of money wasted. Matter of fact, did you know your congressman, I heard this last week or the week before, even if only serves one term, gets his full salary on retirement? I mean, it's unbelievable how much money they're getting. And the retention rate in Congress is like 97%. Basically, if you get in, it's a lifetime job, just like the judiciary. You're not voted out because you've got the power, the franking privilege, meaning you can mail to your constituents for free, plus you've got all the publicity and name recognition. By encouraging government extravagance, destroying its credit, produce fear or inflation with rising prices and general misconduct. Have we had any rising prices over the past 50 years? I mean, or all of you live in $5,000 houses or $10,000 houses, which have been mansions in 1940? I hope you do, but I mean, you've made good money. Promote unnecessary strikes in vital industries, encourage civil disorders, and foster a lenient and soft attitude on the part of the government towards such disorders. By spacious argument, cause the breakdown of old moral virtues, honesty, and sobriety. What's the model today? If it feels good, do it. I mean, one of the Harry Potter books even teaches them to steal, or to lie, to cheat in school. I haven't mentioned the names of those, but I just did. But that was one of the books I was referring to. But along with casting spells and changing forms from human to animal and things like that, they're just little minor things that go on in there that it's magic. And just pray about it if you don't believe me. And C, and this is one I'll get into, cause the registration of all firearms on some pretext with a view toward confiscating them and leaving the population helpless. Well, a lot of people are afraid of guns, and guns do bad things. But it's because bad people are pulling the trigger on those bad guns. And just so you'll know, there has not been a country that I'm aware of in the history of the world since we've had firearms that has remained free or has not ended up in a dictatorship within a period of time after the guns have been confiscated. Okay? They have vast data banks. America probably has more guns per capita than any other country in the world, but we're also free. However, the laws are already in place to make you not free. The laws are already in place to lock you up if you meet the definition of a terrorist. You know what the definition of the terrorist was back in 1999? It was sent around during the last administration to the FBI. They sent a flyer around. Somebody who insists on believing the Bible. Welcome to a terrorist training session. The new Patriot Act 2 allows the government to look at all your financial records, everything. I mean, people used to think they could buy gold and that would be safe. No, they've even changed that now. Pawn shops, you name it, everybody. They can get the records, and it's all to look for terrorists. Well, the interesting thing is, before all these laws pass, something always happens to precipitate them and to make us want to have the law to protect us. We all want protection, right? Here's your protection. Greater is he who's in you than he who's in the world. And that, I don't care who they are. I mean, there are a lot of players out there. You may have heard the names. How many of you heard of the Council on Foreign Relations? I know a lot of you have. Most of you probably. The Trilateralists. We're going up the pyramid here. The Bilderbergers. Gosh, y'all are really up on things. The Committee of 300. And the Illuminati. Okay. But guess what? They're all players on a stage, and I like to think of it as the puppet show. There's the Illuminati down there. Guess who this is? God. God is not surprised by anything that happens. He already knew it. He's not surprised at all. God is getting His people ready for the end time roundup. Now, I don't know when the rapture is going to occur. It'd be wonderful if it occurred right now, except we've got work to do. I mean, I've got friends and relatives that haven't been saved yet that I need to witness to. So, we don't know that. We need to be ready at any time. But we need to know that Jesus Christ is coming. And He's coming again soon. All you have to do is look at the world players. They think they're getting ready to totally take over and maybe surprise God. Well, there is a new world order coming. We don't know where the Antichrist is coming from, who it'll be. Everybody has conjecture. There have been people back in 1988, were you a Christian in 1988? Did you buy that book that when, I think it was in October, that Jesus was coming again in October, and you sent it to all your relatives? And then they put wacko in front of your name? However, if they'd been paying attention, Waco was the next thing on the agenda, and you should have been aware of that. Okay, Waco, the Murrah Building, the Twin Towers. Are we headed somewhere? I get to my next point. This is from the American Sentinel, which is a conservative publication from a man who used to work for a congressman, was his chief of staff. General Tommy Franks, you know who General Franks is, right? He was head of Central Command here. He just ran the war in Iraq. Says, and this is from, actually, I'm going to quote from Newsmax of 11/21/03. General Tommy Franks says that if the United States is hit with a weapon of mass destruction that inflicts large casualties, the Constitution, the rest of it, will likely be discarded in favor of a military form of government, martial law. The former commander of the Military Central Command, warned that if terrorists succeeded in using a weapon of mass destruction against the U.S. or one of our allies, it would likely cause catastrophic consequences for our cherished Republican form of government. I don't know what's coming next, but I believe that there's every intention from the powers that be. Hold it, we use that term all the time. You ever hear that, powers that be? You know who made that term? God, Romans 13. You don't have to turn now, I'll just read it to you. Romans 13. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. And then this is the phrase. The powers that be are ordained of God. How many times have we heard that, the powers that be? I used it, I just thought it was a cliche, but it's biblical. So, just be ready. Are you ready? I always thought that'd be a good title for a newsletter. Guess what? Somebody's already got it. They're using it on their website. You know who? Department of Homeland Security. They have the listing for, those of us that are from Florida know all about being ready. You know, we've got our water, we've got our food, we've got our batteries, our battery-operated radio and things like that. Well, they're telling everybody all over the United States to get ready. There are also things in there about what to do in case of, if it's a dirty bomb or just a nuclear blast or biological or, radio, whatever it is, chemical. That's on the website of the Department of Homeland Security. Okay, now, remember, terrorists was redefined in October 2001 to be you and me. That was right after 9/11. You don't think you're a terrorist? I don't think you are either. I'm not. I love my government. This is the greatest country God ever put on the face of the earth. And our founding fathers put the greatest government in the history of mankind until Jesus Christ comes to rule. So just be aware of that. Okay, this is from Governor Tom Ridge in his farewell address to the state legislature as Pennsylvania governor before taking up his new position in the White House as Director of Homeland Security. Quote, "To those Americans who would lash out at your fellow citizens simply because they worship differently or dress differently or look differently than you, there is one word for such behavior: terrorism." That means this book, by that definition, is terrorism because I criticize Islam. I critique it. I tell the truth about it. Is truth terrorism? According to that definition, it is. And then I mentioned the flyer that went out in the last administration. Some of the specific types of domestic terrorists that were mentioned on the flyer to the FBI, and they're wonderful people in the FBI. We had some godly FBI men in our church and things like that, but the law's there, so if they're ungodly, it can go the other way in a hurry. Right-wing extremists are called terrorists. Defenders of the U.S. Constitution against the federal government and the UN. Ooh, there's another UN. That's what we ought to do, is undo it. The UN is out to take over the world, and the United States military is to become the police force for the UN. That's all in the plan, okay? Groups, this is another right-wing extremist. Groups or individuals engaged in paramilitary training. Well, I may or may not agree with that. I mean, I don't see the need for that, but that's left-wing terrorism naturally. Now, these are hate groups. I have a feeling, I bet I see some hate group people out here. Whoa, one of them was speaking last night. That narrows it down. Christians who insist upon the authority of God's Word, especially in the area of homosexuality. They are terrorists. I'd ask all the terrorists to stand up, but I hate to have everybody stand up at one time here. So, another one, common law movement. That's attempts to make numerous references to the U.S. Constitution. I've already mentioned it several times today. And anyone who challenges the right of law enforcement to do anything is now a domestic terrorist. Anyone who even mentions our precious Constitution is now a terrorist, technically. Did you know that? Good. You're hearing something. Now, let me give you, these are good ones, okay? You'll like this, okay? This is from Parade Magazine, September 1st, 1991. How many of you were alive in 1991? Okay, everybody, all right. If the world population were gathered together in one spot, how large an area would we cover? Now you start thinking, is it as big as Texas or, Iraq, Australia? How big an area? You give everybody 2 feet by 2 feet. You don't get that much at a football game, right? Think of a football stadium. Here's the answer. With a world population of about 5.5 billion, it's larger now, if we allowed everyone a generous 2 foot by 2 foot patch of ground, I wouldn't call that generous, but that's 2 feet by 2 feet, on which to stand, we'd cover an area of less than 800 square miles. Only about the size of Jacksonville, Florida. Surprising. And then from CBN World Watch, November-December 94, all the world's population of 5.6 billion people could be contained in the state of Texas. That's allowing 1,300 feet of room per person. And fertility rates are falling in this country and in most of the Western world, but not in Muslim countries. What does the Bible say? Children are a gift of the Lord. So, why don't we have more children as Christians? I can say that because I've got 5. And no, I'm not Catholic, so that's the first thing everybody asks. But We wanted them all, okay? And they're all a blessing, okay? Now, here's something. This is another thing. I carry these things around in my briefcase, as I told you. This is from Straight Talk by Tom Anderson. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. Schools should not be for producing degrees, but for producing character. And that's what we're talking about here, is character, godly character. This is something you probably didn't know. It has been acknowledged that 1/4 of Adolf Hitler's concentration camp guards held doctorate degrees. 1/4. Some of the most educated people are the most wicked. For example, you have to be educated to even know how to commit some crimes, right? What counts most in life is not what you have in your pocket or your head, but what you have in your heart. Character is all that you are. What does it say? It's better to have a good name rather than great riches. To fail is not to be lacking in character, but to be lacking in character is to fail. The little voice inside you should be your conscience, not your pocket radio, unless you're jogging. That's okay, but only in one ear because you got to watch out for traffic. You are what you eat, think, and do and don't do. Someday, you will sit down alone to a banquet of consequences. Actually, you're going to appear before a throne. Christianity is the root of the morality tree. That's the reason we need to be spreading the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Okay, here's another one that hits me. This is from the Washington Post. Ooh, you read that? Well, when I'm visiting my parents, I used to read it. So, no, actually, it's a good newspaper. They just don't print on the right-hand column of the pages. It's just all on the left. So, of course, they got the Washington Times that prints all on the right and very little on the left. So it evens out. You just read both papers. What a waste. How many of you recycle? Everybody, I hope, or most people. This is the Washington Post, a green paper. Recycling makes no ecological or economic sense. Unfortunately, most recycling doesn't make economic sense. Cities and counties are wasting money, using energy, and increasing air and water pollution in a misguided attempt to reuse almost everything. First, other than aluminum cans, almost no product has developed a sustainable demand absent government mandates or subsidies. Now, what does that have to do with us? Well, this is God's creation, okay? Why are we spending all our time on recycling? It takes more. For example, it takes more energy to wash diapers than it does to make the Pampers. So there's a net loss there, even though you think you're doing the right thing. Waste glass, for example, has little demand, and there's only a 10% energy savings. And that's before those big trucks that go down your street and leave tracks down the road where they're dripping stuff and gas and everything. That's probably the other 10% is gone. Remember when McDonald's changed from the plastic clamshells, the styrofoam? Cardboard containers may be recyclable, but it results in 46% less air pollution to make the styrofoam, and 42% less water consumption, and 30% less energy consumption to use the styrofoam. So who did that? Well, landfills. We're running out of space, right? Everybody says we're running out of space. Well, I already told you everybody can fit in Jacksonville. Well, if they can all fit in Jacksonville, we can use one of the counties south of that for landfill, right? I can say that because I lived up there for both counties. So, we're not running out of landfill space. We're really running out of in your backyard landfill space, okay? Landfills are limited by politics, not space. Abundant dumps already exist, and all of America's expected trash for the next 1,000 years, and as most of you know, we are far and away the world's largest producer of trash, for the next 1,000 years could fit into a 15 square mile landfill. That's not that big. And there's an awful lot of empty land if you fly over this country where you wouldn't even have anybody for 15 miles. Okay, that's kind of off the agenda here, but I wanted to cover it. Another thing I wanted to get into, by the way, the city of Clearwater is stopping recycling of glass. I heard it last week on TV. Codex, C-O-D-E-X. Have any of you heard of that? Those are rules and regulations that the UN is behind. These are actually some in Germany where they're trying to regulate everything. And the reason I'm concerned is my wife owns a vitamin store, a health food store, but they're trying to regulate all health food products and additives, including vitamins. Wouldn't you like to have to go to your doctor once every 2 or 3 months to get a vitamin prescription? Do you know in Germany right now you can only, if you want vitamin C, which some of you take for colds or whatever, they've shown that C and E, well, I'm not going to get into health claims here. Watch TV. But anyway, no, don't do that. Read a book. In Germany, vitamin C, the largest tablet you can get is 50 milligrams. 50. Now, a lot of people take a 500 or 1,000, or Linus Pauling advocated, I think, 5,000 units a day or something like that. I've forgotten what it was. But just be aware of that. Don't let that pass as stealth legislation. Don't let the UN dictate what we do in this country. Have any of you noticed, you've been to the Great Smoky Mountains and noticed that the UN that's already under UN control, or some of our other parks, that we're slowly, y'all don't look like frogs, but that's what we are. We're frogs sitting on top of the big burner in the big boiling pot. The water is not boiling yet, but it hadn't gotten hot enough for us to jump around and make a noise enough to stop some of this stuff. We've got great people out there trying, but you need to be aware that just because we have the greatest country and the greatest government in the world doesn't mean that everybody in the government is for you as a Christian, or even for people in this country. There are a lot of people who think we'd be better off with a one-world government. They think, and a lot of those people are in big business. It's certainly more efficient for big business to take your job and send it to India than it is to pay you 5 or 6, 7 times as much over here. When you call if you have a computer problem, you're probably going to be talking to somebody in India. Or if you call for airline reservations, I think now, you're going to get it in India. And India is having a real boom over there. In the meantime, we are getting new jobs, but they aren't of the same caliber that we've lost. I've already told you about overpopulation. Now, this is the fun page. Conspiracy. Ooh, that's a bad word. People don't want to believe it. Do you believe in conspiracy? That was a rhetorical question you don't have to answer. But now you've had it, that's on, they've got it. So, okay, do you believe in conspiracy? It's not important what we believe. Well, it is. If you're going to do something about something. But I want to know what God believes. Don't you? Oh, I just flipped open to Psalm 105, which is the eternal covenant with Israel. So, I will give unto thee the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance eternally. I just thought I'd hit that as I'm going by, but since that seems to cause some problems these days. Okay, Psalm 2. Let's see what God has to say. Tell me if this sounds like a conspiracy. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. That's a conspiracy by definition. Saying, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. So what does God think about that? He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. the Lord shall have them in derision. Like I said, we're not doing anything to fool God. Any of you heard of the Noahide laws? Noahide? Look them up on your computer. But those, the 10 Commandments are being slowly removed from this, not slowly. I mean, we've got a Supreme Court justice in a southern state who was removed, Judge Moore, for having the 10 Commandments. I mean, if that's the case, then the Supreme Court ought to call the military in to remove themselves from the Supreme Court building, because the 10 Commandments are right there. I don't think that's going to happen, but they may remove them from there. But they're going to be replaced. What they're trying to do is replace them by the 7 Noahide laws. That's Noahide laws. That goes back to before the in the Old Testament, supposedly given to Noah. But anyway, I don't have time to get into it. I've got a lot more, and that's some of the stuff I'll be covering in the Richeson Report Journal. MEMPA, M-E-H-P-A. We've discussed that before at these things. That's the Model Emergency Powers Act, Health Powers Act. You familiar with that? I had mentioned it before briefly. That's actually something that was proposed by the government to allow the states individually to take over in times of emergency as far as quarantining you. But along with that, they can force you to take vaccinations or take shots. They can also confiscate your property, including, guess what? Firearms. It's a stealth takeover. The state of Florida has passed it, as last count that I could find, 6 other states. A lot of it have rejected it outright. Just as a lot of states or a lot of communities are rejecting parts of the Patriot Act. It says in the Constitution, I need to read this to you. This is on the amendment. The first 10, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. The Second Amendment has to do with the right to carry fire, to be armed, a well-armed militia. Well, a militia back then was everyone. And I could give you many examples. By the way, the more guns there are in a location, the less crime there is. There's a book out called More Guns, Less Crime by Dr. John Lott, who is, I believe, a Yale professor. He wrote it he was going to show how guns cause crime, and he ended up finding out just the opposite. They keep crime from happening. Amendment 9 to the Constitution says, the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be constructed to deny or disparage others retained by the government? No, by the people. Amendment 10, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, to the government, federal government, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Are we having more government or less government? Who does this say is supposed to be in control? The people. It's our Constitution. It's our country. Vote, or actually get active, do other things. Sometimes you don't have a whole lot of choice in voting. But now, there's one other thing that I definitely want to cover. The Federal Reserve. Who owns the Federal Reserve? The government? The Treasury? You all are way ahead of most of the population. I've talked to people that have been in banking, relatives that have been in banking for 25 years, and they didn't know that the Federal Reserve banks are owned by other banks, private individuals. Many of them in Europe and things like that. Our Federal Reserve, they lend us our money, we owe them the debt, are not owned by we the people. What's wrong with that? A lot. Remember Andrew Jackson almost got in a big fight over not having a state bank and things like that? You could have U.S. Treasury notes. I remember when I had a paper out back in the late 50s, early 60s. Yes, I'm that old, a lot older. But anyway, they had, you'd get $5 bills that had a red seal on them. for those of you that had paper routes and remember that, or had retail businesses. The red seal was a U.S. Treasury note. You don't see them anymore. It's all green. They're all Federal Reserve notes. This one that I keep is a blue seal. You know what that means? It's a silver certificate. This certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $1 in silver, payable to the bearer on demand. Can't get it. Our total silver supply is gone. It's all been used up, all the surplus. We are actually in a silver deficit right now and have been for some time. Silver is used in commercial applications, gold, much more so than gold. The ownership of the Federal Reserve. Okay, I've told you about that. Now, I just want to show you what happens. Inflation. Everybody knows what inflation is, right? We've all lived with it. It got real bad there around 1980, but it hadn't been as bad recently, and we all are loving the fact that our interest rates are low and we can refinance our houses and things like that. Why do we have inflation? Do you think the Federal Reserve could have anything to do with it? Nah, why would they want to do that? Well, you have fractional banking. Fractional banking means you can, if you have $1 in your reserves, you can then make $4 out, loan out 4 or 8 or whatever they want to decide to do. Okay. The Federal Reserve was founded in 1913. That's when it was passed, okay? What cost $100 in 1912? Think of $100. You know how much that would cost today? 2002? You can guess, it'd be a lot, right? $1,854. Meaning, your $100 bill of today is worth $5.39 in 1912 dollars, before the Fed got involved. And everybody say, well, they've always had inflation. You know, that's just the way it is. Wrong, according to the inflation calculator. What cost $100 in 1800? You know how much that cost in 1912? $54.77. There was actually deflation. Well, let's go on further. Well, you know, you had the Civil War and things like that involved. In 1860, $100. In 1912, would buy you was $103.76. That's very close, right? Not that much inflation. And that was through a big war and a big change in this country. Okay. Remember the Roaring Twenties? You've all heard of that. Some of you may have been flappers. I don't know. You know. I don't dance. What cost $100 in 1912 cost $183.23 17 years later, 1929, right before the Depression. You see that? That's almost doubling or halving the value. The $100 became $54. Then we went through the Great Depression, right? $100 in 1929 cost $82.35 in 1939. Well, you'd wonder, how does that apply to me? Okay, well, I'm going to show you. We went through the Great Second World War, okay? We had to pay for that war. And remember, we had just said that, I didn't tell you this, but $100 in 1939 was $124.90 and 45. In 1945, if you took a $100 bill, that same $100 bill would be worth 10 cents. This is a modern dime. All those things that you're carrying in your wallet that they've tried to do away with, by the way, with coins, they're dimes. Just since 1945. Now, what's the best way to take over a people? Debase their currency. Gresham's law. Remember in 1965 when they took all the silver out of the coins? What happened to them? Gresham's law says everything valuable will go out of circulation. That's exactly what happened. So the Federal Reserve is one of the things that was set up by the powers that be. I'm just telling you this. Why? I think it's part of a controlling mechanism. If you can control the currency, one of the Rothschilds said, if you give me the currency, I can take over any country. And that's true. They were on both sides of the First World War, by the way, the bankers. They financed the war, and then they were paid the reparations. That's a great deal if you can do it. How many bankers? No, I don't want. But anyway, I just want you to know that there is good news. Jesus Christ is still Lord. And we're way ahead of the curve because we know what's coming. But we need to be prepared. Don't just automatically trust everything that's given to you or told you or that your government says, because those aren't Christians writing those rules. How many Christians do you think there are in government? Even if it's, most of this country is Christians supposedly, but just be aware that there are many things that you can do to protect yourself, so be ready. Jesus Christ is coming back for us, but we don't know when. But it's a lot sooner, a lot closer than it was a year ago. God bless you. Thank you.